Do you have a loved one right now who is struggling with an addiction and you don't know what to do? Are you unsure about what the recovery process even looks like or that journey itself of overcoming the addiction? Are you having challenges right now with communicating with your loved one who is struggling with that addiction? If you answered yes to any one of those questions, you're in the right place and this video is for you. Hi friend, my name is Bernie from Tiger Resilience, where we offer addiction solutions for family members and friends who have a loved one who is struggling with an addiction, in addition to helping the person with the addiction. If you're new here, welcome, and we're so glad that you took time out of your busy life and schedule to review this content. I guarantee you will find value in this because we're going to be discussing with our guest, Olivia, the challenges that she had to go through facing an addiction and dealing with the communication in her family and how she overcame that adversity and transcended to a new life today. Following somebody's experience, their strength and their hope, and the challenges of their adversity to overcome it and transcend to a new life is a very powerful and empowering message for all, both family members who are struggling with this issue, as well as the person with the addiction. If you feel that you'd like to be empowered and learn more, please stay tuned because we're going to be bringing on Olivia in 1 second, and she's going to share her experience and strength and hope with us, and giving us the insight and the wisdom of what it's like to overcome the challenges of addiction, to change her life, and to begin a journey anew. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Olivia and thank her once again for taking her time and giving her experience, strength, and hope with us on this podcast show today. So, welcome to the show, Olivia. So glad to have you back.
Hi.
Olivia, why don't we take it from your story? Why don't we go back to the start where this all first kind of took fruition to you, and we'll walk our way through there, if that's okay.
Absolutely. So growing up, I had a pretty normal childhood. Nothing too crazy in hardships. I grew up in Indiana. My parents were divorced since I was 3, and my dad had remarried. And, I was a good kid. I went to church every Sunday. I was a cheerleader. I got good grades. Growing up wasn't too hard. When I was about 10, my stepmom started drinking, and she became an alcoholic, but now has 8 years of sobriety.
Wow.
And, but it was about 18. I was turning 18 when my dad had kicked me out, and I was living with my mom full time. He had kicked me out for drinking, and I ended up drinking and driving, and I didn't get in trouble with the police or anything. However, that wasn't something my parents were okay with, and I wasn't accepting of the punishment. So instead, I decided that I wanted to live with my mom full time.
Okay.
And that was really hard for me, going from living with both of my parents full time to living with just one parent.
Sure.
Full time. And during that period, I had gone pretty downhill, hanging out with some not very great people. And this one small group of people that I was hanging out with was using fentanyl. And after being around it for so much, I got quite curious of, okay, why did they like this so much? Why do they do this so much? And so I just kind of dove right in, and after that very first time I had used, I was hooked. I had became an everyday user after that.
Wow.
Can I ask? August of 2020.
August of 2020. Let me ask you, how were you using it? Was it oral? Was it sniffing or?
I was snorting it.
Snorting. Okay, so.
Snorting it.
Yep.
So after that first use in August of 2020, I had been using ever since. And in September of 2020, I had overdosed. It was me and a friend, and we had overdosed in the same bed. It took me to be Narcaned 3 times to be taken back from my overdose.
Who found you, if I could ask? Who discovered you?
We were staying with.
Okay.
Yes. So we were staying at a friend's house, and she thought we were talking. Because we had been wheezing. She thought we were talking, and she was trying to tell us to quiet down because her parents were asleep. And when she came in, she had noticed that we weren't breathing.
Wow.
So they ended up waking up her parents. Her parents called the cops. Luckily, both of us were brought back. After that, it had really scared me.
Hmm.
That was the first time I'd ever experienced anything like that. And so clean for a while. My mom had known. I had to have my mom pick me up from the hospital. Um, I had told her that it was just a one-time thing, that I had tried it once and didn't go well.
Okay.
And so she really didn't know that I had a problem at that point. I had gotten clean from September of 2020 until New Year's. And then on New Year's, I had relapsed. And it was a pretty bad relapse. It was a full relapse to where I was back to using every single day. A lot of times this time I was using by myself. I wasn't using with friends anymore. It was a daily thing on my own. I tried to hide from everyone. Hid it from all of my friends, hid it from my mom. She could tell my grades were slipping. She didn't like that I was never home, but she couldn't tell exactly what was going on.
Okay.
And by this point, I wasn't even talking to my dad at all.
Okay.
I wasn't talking to my stepmom. I wasn't talking to my brothers. They were just pretty much completely cut off. And
Can I ask
this
you?
was during my senior year of high school.
Well,
But
can I ask you a question regarding when you cut off your dad and your stepmom and your brothers? Was it your isolation that kind of created that condition in a sense?
absolutely. I was very angry and very hurt by the fact that they had kicked me out.
Okay.
I felt like they didn't really love me anymore, and so I decided I just wasn't going to talk to them anymore.
Okay.
It wasn't just them. It was really pretty much everybody. My communication with my mom was very, very minimal, very surface level, very just how was work today, how was school today. Nothing really under the surface. And that was just because I was never home, or I would hide from her in my room at all times, basically. She had done a little bit of research and did know just a little bit about fentanyl, just because of my overdose and because it was such a growing problem in the city that we were living in at the
Mm-hmm.
time. Before my overdose, she never really paid any attention to it. She didn't really think that was going to be a problem for me, and I didn't either. So during my senior year of high school, this was the second semester of my senior year of high school when this was happening, when I had relapsed again, and I just slept through all of my classes. I failed a few of my classes.
Mm-hmm.
Just wasn't participating at all. My mom even got an email at one point from one of my teachers asking if everything was okay.
Okay.
But she kind of just brushed it off. And she would get on my butt about me not having good grades, and, but I would blame it on, well, I work every day after school. And then I go over and see my friends after school.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would get home super late and I would just go to bed. And so I blame it on stress and whatever. I didn't want to tell her that it was because I was under the influence.
Sure. And she was still really didn't know that. Yeah. And she was not aware of this really.
No. She could tell that something was going on with me because that was very out of character for me to get the grades that I was.
Yes.
But besides that, she didn't really know a whole lot. So once I graduated high school,
mm-hmm.
she moved to Ohio, and I was supposed to go with her. At this time, I was still using, so I moved my stuff into her house, but I really just stayed in the town that I was in Indiana, because I had friends that were using. I was using. I didn't want to take the time to try and find the drugs there, so I was just pretty much couch surfing back in Indiana the entire summer after my graduation, and this would have been the summer of 21.
Mm-hmm.
And then the fall of 21 is when I started college. I thought if I go away to college, I'll go to Ohio, so I'll be close to my mom. But I'll go away to college, I won't know anyone, and I can just get clean and start up. And I thought that would work. At first it did. I met some new friends. I told them about my situation, and they helped me get clean. But that only lasted for about 2 weeks. and then I had relapsed again.
Okay.
And that whole first go ahead.
But the new friends, they were the ones not using it all, and they understood what you were dealing with, and they tried to help you out. Okay, so you just found another source to connect with after a couple of weeks.
So by the time I had gone to college, I made this whole new group of friends, and they drank, but that was it. They were never hard drug users, like I was. But I explained to them my situation, where I was coming from, and they agreed to help me get clean. So they would watch over me while I went through my withdrawals, and, they kept my car keys from me, and they really helped take care of me for, until I got through my withdrawals. But after about 2 weeks, I just couldn't do it anymore. I got stressed out with school. I still had really bad cravings, and I eventually relapsed and spent the entire first semester of college doing absolutely nothing.
Wow.
I was high and lazy and tired. I partied, and that was it. I hardly ever went to any of my classes, and I really just flunked out. By that point, I had realized I had a problem. My parents kept asking about my grades, and I didn't know what to tell them. At one point, I went and visited home, and my little brothers, who are 8 years younger, were asking what's wrong with me, because I looked sick, sounded sick. I kept falling asleep while they were trying to talk to me, and my little brothers came forward and said that they were concerned.
Sure.
That really dug deep inside of me. So it was about a week after that I had called my stepmom, and I said, hey, I have a problem. And I admitted to them, I'm failing all of my classes because I've been addicted to fentanyl for the last year and a half, 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I told my stepmom. She said, all right, let me talk to your dad. We'll work something out. So I called my mom. I told my mom, and this was right before December of 2021, because the semester was about to end. And stepmom told me that they would allow me to move back into their house back in Indiana, and help me get clean. And they did. So I moved back home. I was going to meetings every single day to me through the withdrawals. And all of this was from my own willpower. I wasn't medicated at all. I just went home, did my withdrawals at home, and then went to meetings every single day.
Okay.
And this worked for about 5.5 months.
Okay. Wow.
And then I had relapsed again. And I did not want to tell my family whatsoever. I was so afraid of what they would say, how they would react.
Okay. So the communication broke right down. Yep.
Yes, it did. It went from, I was doing good. I was going to meetings. I was excited about my sobriety. I would talk to them all the time about how I felt, and would share with them, what I learned at meetings. And then it turned to, I would go to work. I'd come home. I wouldn't talk to them. I would just go hide up in my room. As soon as, I could tell I was doing something wrong, I kind of just shut away.
Wow.
So they ended up finding out about 2 or 3 weeks after I had relapsed. One of my coworkers reached out to my parents at the job I was working at and said that I had been falling asleep at my desk at work. And this was on Father's Day of 2022.
Okay.
That they had gotten the news that something was going on with me. So they sat me down. And this was one of the hardest moments of my life. I sat down with them, and they were trying to discuss with me what was going on. But I got very defensive. I got quite hostile. I was crying, and that kind of sent my dad into this angry, scared, frustrated state, because I was putting my life at risk. I was putting their lives at risk.
Sure.
I was putting my little brother's lives at risk by not even just having it in the house, but driving them around while I was under the influence. And so my dad got very upset, and he told me that I just needed to get out, that he was just going to throw my stuff out on the street, that I need to grab it up and get out. And I had never seen my dad speak to somebody like that before. And that was really, really hard for me, because I thought he was trying to tell me that he didn't love me. And that wasn't the case whatsoever. He was just scared. He was scared for my life. He was scared of what was going to happen. He was scared of where I was going to go or where I was going to end up.
Plus, he had other children in the house, correct? So there was a family that they were concerned about. Sure. So safety is always a paramount with a family when they're struggling with those kind of challenges, as tough as that sounds.
Absolutely. Yeah, safety comes first for everyone. So my parents gave me the option. They said they would give me a week to find somewhere to go. They said I couldn't stay with them anymore, and they didn't tell me where I had to go. They just said, get up. You can stay on the street. You can live with a friend. You can live with your mom. You can sleep in your car. We don't care, but you just can't be here anymore. Mm-hmm. And that's when I decided I was going to go to rehab.
Okay.
So my stepmom and my mom decided to help me find a good rehab that would take our insurance that we could afford. And that's when I went into a 35-day inpatient program.
Okay. So you went through the withdrawal management, right? And so the medication, withdrawal management. Yep.
I did. Yep. I did use Suboxone while I was in there.
Mm-hmm. Which is part of the treatment. Yeah, that's part of the treatment cycle itself. They use that to titrate you from the opioid end.
So I did 35 days at the inpatient rehab, medicated and therapy and classes and meetings. Mm-hmm. And as soon as I left the inpatient rehab, I went to California, where I was there for almost 6 months doing a PHP and outpatient.
Mm-hmm. Now, who made the referral for the California? Was that something from the facility, or is that something that your family helped you with, or is something you found?
Yeah, so when I was in the inpatient, there was a woman that was about my age, mm-hmm. and she said that last time she had tried to get clean, because she had been through there a couple times before, that the last time she had done it, she decided to continue her treatment in California. So she kind of planted the seed in my head.
Got it.
And then while I was in there, I was able to ask staff, my case manager, to look into it and see what she could find and just give me some information. So it was something that was kind of planted in my head, and I mm-hmm. just had my case manager look into. Mm-hmm. So we found this program that offered a sober living house. And then they had their own facility that we would go and do groups and meetings in on a daily basis. So after about 3 months of PHP, where I was there for almost 8 hours a day doing groups and learning, after 3 months of that, then I dropped down to just IOP. And so I'd only have to do 2 groups a day, which was 2 hours a day. And then I was allowed to have a little bit more freedom. They kind of loosened the tether a little bit. So I was able to get a job. I was able to have a later curfew. Still, I was, getting drug tested and having to go into groups, and it was required to still go to meetings. But I had a little bit more freedom of what I could work, what I could do in my spare time.
Sure. Oh, excellent.
So after that, I came back to Indiana, and I'm doing meetings still. I'm no longer in any treatment programs or on any medicated treatment or anything like that, but I do still go to meetings. I do still work the 12 steps. Now I have a job that I've already gotten a promotion for, that I've only been to for almost 6 months. I have my own apartment.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Good than ever. My 1 year was just on the 24th.
Wow. Congratulations. So a couple of questions regarding, just also for the audience. So PHP is a partial hospitalization, and that's where you are basically there on a daily basis, and an IOP and IOP is an intensive outpatient, and based on whatever the programs are, but they're still fairly intense, where you're a couple of hours a day. Sometimes it might be 2 or 3
Right.
sessions per week or so, but there's a lot of high level of commitment to, the treatment cycle as well too. So that's amazing story. So let me ask you, what were some of the challenges you had in your early recovery that you can recall?
Yeah. The uncomfortableness of sitting in, well, first of all, I had gone to a rehab center. I had never been there before. I was in a different town, so I didn't know anyone there. And it was something I had never experienced. Every time I'd gotten clean before that, I'd done it on my own. So now I was trying to sit there, listen to other people, meet other people, learn to trust other people, and just all on top of heightened emotions, all on top of trying to learn how to deal with what I was finally actually fully feeling on the inside. And same with going to California, being in a place where I know nobody, and just trusting that what all of these strangers are telling me to do is going to work for me.
Okay. So you had a lot of blind trust in it, but you had a faith in that something would work out for you, because you were obviously seeing the success from other people. And obviously, I'm assuming you were hearing these stories from a lot of the 12-step program success stories as they would share their experiences.
Sure.
Okay, so let me ask you this. So you've gone through these. Now, was medication-assisted treatment ever explained, or was that as an option for you at all? Or is it something that you chose because there are 2 paths you can go on in recovery, and they both work for recovery, where medication-assisted treatment, which is the Suboxone and the methadone and or Vivitrol right now, that works both for alcohol and opiate. But those are usually the part of the treatment if it's required or necessary for certain people. It sounds like for you it really wasn't, because you were fairly young and you new at this and hadn't been doing it a long time. But was that part of a treatment option for you when you were coming out of treatment?
When I was coming out of treatment, it could have been.
Okay.
I did actually continue to use Suboxone for 2 months after leaving inpatient.
Okay.
When I was in my PHP program.
Yes. Okay.
So I did use it for a little bit of an extended period of time.
Okay.
However, I personally chose to come off of it as I got more sober time.
Got it. Perfect.
Mainly because I know that some people can get stuck using it. They don't like to have to go through withdrawals that may come with that they already just went through with whatever drug they were coming off of.
Sure.
So some people are afraid to kind of go through that again, so they just decide to stay on it.
Sure.
I see both sides of, yes, you should do it because it does help. If you were to use again, you won't feel the effects. It'll be harder to overdose if you continue to use Suboxone or Vivitrol. But I also do see the other side of it can be addictive, depending on what substance you were using to help. So I do see both sides of it.
Sure.
I think in a monitored and short period of time, it can be insanely helpful.
Sure.
I found it very helpful to ease my cravings. But again, it needs to be monitored. Yes. In my opinion.
Yes, and most programs will do that. And again, your use was not really heavy. If somebody, a lot of the patients that I've worked with over the years, that if they've had, a 10 or 15 or 20-year run where they really were struggling, and there's a lot of neurological changes that happen in the brain that sometimes can create that condition where they may need that for an extended period of time, or sometimes for life. And some people, that really is a lifelong aspect, because they've just depleted their own ability to produce their own neurotransmitters for a period of time. So, but like anything else, like a diabetic using insulin or anything else, it really is in that same analogy. As long as you mentioned, it's controlled, it is regulated, and it does help a lot of people. Actually, one of the patients I was just working working with, who's now been a year and a half free of his heavy duty fentanyl addiction, who is still using the Suboxone right now, bupropion, and that's helped him on his journey huge. So it depends on the individual and what you feel, and I appreciate the idea that it took that couple of months where it gave you that the cravings were put at bay, and you were able to really work on your personal recovery in a sense, and then you were able to titrate
Absolutely.
off of that. So that's amazing. Wow, that's an amazing story. So what was it like when you first started getting into recovery? You started to have to obviously getting some feelings coming in. So what was that like to have the emotions open back up again? Because I know a lot of people talk about that as a real challenge, is that they're dealing with all these new emotions, and it's kind of raw for some.
I will say I cried a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Even just the smallest things would make me cry because I didn't do a whole lot of crying
Mm-hmm.
before. I didn't feel even an ounce of sadness or an ounce of anger. And so there was a couple times where I found myself getting deep into depression, where I didn't want to get out of bed, or finding myself very angry at even something very small. And even before I started using, I wasn't an angry person.
Yes.
And never really was very, very much of an angry person. But I found myself getting very frustrated very quickly with just small things, because before those small things didn't matter because they didn't need to matter, but once you start to get sober, everything just kind of blows up. Every little thing feels like it's a catastrophe.
Yes.
Sorry.
No?
And so that was very, very challenging to try and understand that there is going to be highs and lows, and the lows aren't going to be the end of the world.
Correct.
Also understanding that the highs aren't always going to be how I'm going to feel. I had to understand that there needed to be a balance of there will be good times and there will be bad times.
Sure.
And that's just how it's going to be, and kind of finding a way to monitor myself through those.
Sure. One of my programs, we discuss it as I believe the three terms that work through recovery is when you first start in the journey, it's a feel, because you're going to start to feel literally everything because the substance has numbed you for a period of time. And then once you start to feel, you have to deal with it, and that's what you're discussing now, the process of dealing with those emotions and the feelings that have been suppressed for a long time, not to mention all the challenges that you may have put yourself through just from the whirlwind of dealing with the addiction and that lifestyle itself. And then, of course, the healing is the third part to that, and that's really where the real journey begins, where you start to really heal and become that new person, the person that you're meant to be in many ways. So that's amazing story. Absolutely.
And not only is the bad feelings heightened, but the good feelings too. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times you have to realize, like, okay, you know what, this is what I'm doing this for, is to feel this happiness, because that a lot of times can make those bad parts feel small.
Oh, absolutely.
The joy that you can find in it, that's also magnified, and that, I would say, helps a lot.
Wow, amazing. Absolutely. So spot on with that too, really, because it is understanding there's a lot of good. Life is still life. Life is unfair. It always was, always will be, and it will treat us unfair from time to time. It's not life. It's our response to it in many ways. And now that you've learned these new skills about focusing on knowing the happiness, or we should say really joy, because happiness is a choice. Joy is that internal motivation that we have within us. If you feel that sense of, the enlightenment, and certainly in early recovery, that's one of the major factors that really gives people that springboard to really start their lives and begin anew in many ways.
Absolutely.
Too. Yeah. So let me ask you, what has communication? You had some challenges with that, obviously, through the substance use. But what was communication now like? How has that evolved from the the misinformation and the guarded and isolation and the minimal talk to today, where there's really more of an open door? So what's that look like today?
Yes. So with my mom, I talk to her on the phone at least 3 times a week.
Mm.
A lot of times I call to get her advice on something. I like to tell her about my day if I have a crazy day at work. I really just call her to see what she's up to, see what she's doing. We talk a lot. And same with my dad and my stepmom. We talk a lot more than we really almost ever have. Obviously, growing up, I was a teenage girl, so
Sure.
sure, I was going to be a shutout for my parents.
Sure.
But the older I get, and I just feel so excited and happy to be where I'm at and to be alive. That I don't want to take that for granted. And so I talk to my dad a lot more than I used to. But my mom and my dad and my stepmom, they were all able to actually sit me down and tell me the hardest parts and what affected them the most throughout my using. My mom said that the communication aspect was the hardest part for
Wow.
me, because when she wanted to talk to me, she wanted to trust me,
Mm-hmm.
and she later found out that whole time I had been lying to her. Every time she would ask me what's going on, ask me if I'm okay, ask me if I'm using anything, I would tell her no. I would tell her I was fine. I would tell her to leave me alone. And she wanted to trust me. So she would kind of step off a little bit, and, later she found out that her feelings and her thoughts were correct, and that I was just kind of brushing those off. And she wanted to have a better relationship than I forced us to have. And that was really the hardest part for her. And she has told me that from the time that I was in inpatient rehab, and she'll still say the same thing today, is the hardest part was her wanting to know so bad what was going on with me, but not being able to because I would just shut it down.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. That's actually a really powerful piece, because that is one of the greatest challenges in the families that I work with. Right now, the greatest challenge is that miscommunication or no communication really is actually the key here. And that's what you're sharing on, is that it's, with the substance use, it's a lot of isolation. It's a lot of hiding. There's a lot of shame in it. There's a lot of fear in it. It's a lot of judgment and stigma and all these other factors that play into it. And that just breaks down that whole line. And in listening to your story, obviously having that kind of that rebirth of communication with your family now, and having that even greater than it was when you were younger, because obviously going through the teenage years. But I think it's also the transitional. It wasn't just you surviving this and transitioning from those challenges to where you are today, but your family was along the ride there too as well. And as much as they were
Absolutely.
protecting their own safety, they certainly could see within you, as you continue to progress and get better, they're always there for you. They can be mad at you and really hurt and upset, but at the end of the day, they're still your cheerleader. They're the ones in the back going, you got this, and we know you can get this. Wow. That's absolutely amazing.
My dad definitely showed that to me. Like, my families have always been such a huge support for me. As I mentioned before, my stepmom has 8 years of sobriety. So she has been through it before. That side of the family has been through it before. So she really understood. But also it was hard for her to see it from the other side.
Oh, wow.
To be from the other side of the perspective from being the addict to loving and trying to support an addict.
Yes.
And so my dad had obviously gone through this before as well, loving his wife.
Yes.
And having to deal with it with her, and then, loving his daughter and going through that with me. And when he had found out, especially on Father's Day, that really, really hurt him. And instead of us really being able to communicate through it, it turned into him kind of talking at me.
Sure.
And I shared before that it wasn't me. It wasn't me that he hated. It wasn't me that he was angry at. It was the addiction. It was the lying, the mistrust, the hiding, the danger that I was putting everyone in. He was fearful of all of that, but it came towards me.
Of course.
And of course, in the beginning, I was thinking, he hates me. He doesn't love me anymore. He doesn't want to support me anymore. But in fact, he was doing that because he loved me, and because he wanted me to be better. And he understood that there was nothing else that he could really do to help me, but besides stop enabling me.
Yes. Yeah. And then, and I'm glad you broke that down like that, because this is not tough love. This really is a safety factor with families. And I also really appreciate your your insight, and you have such great wisdom with this, to know that it really is not the character, because addiction is a behavior. It's an external behavior, and the characteristics of that based on what's going on to protect your addiction is going to create all these different personalities and these external behaviors. But the person who's in here, that core person is still there. Unfortunately, just kind of lost. And so it's never not caring for that person. It's the behaviors and all the challenges. And again, as you mentioned before, the safety factor is a big deal, because there are families that have to make a very tough decision. And again, this is not tough love. This is basic survival in many ways. If you have young children, you have somebody who can put a family itself at risk, they have to make the right decision for the greater whole, as they're still trying to help or influence you, and also not enabling you with your behavior, certainly too. Wow. So let me ask you this. And I really appreciate your story. You have such incredible wisdom, and I'm so glad I had the opportunity to be able to do this a second time, and now without the technical failures that we had during our first session here. So what are some things that you would advise any family members now that that may be dealing with a loved one who's maybe they're early recovery, maybe they're in early addiction, or there are some behaviors that they're unaware of. But what are some things that you could advise a family of if they're noticing something's going on and they're concerned and they're lost, like your family was?
So my biggest thing, and this is what I will always tell any family member, is you can't do that for them.
Mm-hmm.
I was unable to reach out to my parents until I was ready. Up until that point, I was shut down and I was quiet. So still express those concerns, even though they get shut down. Still express, we love you, we support you, we want to do whatever we can to help you, to an extent. But to understand that you have to be patient with the loved one, because you can't force anything on
Of course.
them. The more that it is forced, the more it's going to be turned down.
Mm-hmm.
The more it's going to seem like a punishment than something to save them, something that is going to give them a better life for everyone. So the biggest thing is just to understand that you can't do it for them. And I've seen a lot of family members get very hurt by that, very stressed about that, because they want a better life so bad for this loved one that they put so much time and effort into it. But there needs to be a point where you have to step back, because at some point there's nothing else you can do.
Sure.
Besides let them do it from a distance, but make sure they know we love you and we support you.
Wow. What a very powerful message on that. And the truth is that, as you mentioned, we can't change anyone. The only thing that we have power of change over is ourselves. But one of the things that families sometimes don't realize is that your power of influence is absolutely huge. And that's where that's a secret ingredient. That's the key to helping your loved one, is being that power of influence. And Olivia just shared that just that person struggling with the addiction, as long as they know that they are loved unconditionally, but there are conditions to the behaviors. And that's really what this comes down to. You're loved unconditionally, but there's conditions to your behaviors as a result of the addiction. Having that insight, I know that keeps that little fire going. And for the many people I've worked with over the years, almost 30 years now, literally that has been one of the major factors that has kept people from going off the deep end and have gotten them into the recovery, is they knew that fire was in there too. So wow, what a powerful message. Thank you so much. Let me ask you this same question now, but this is the person out there struggling with the addiction. What is some advice would you have for them?
And same thing, and I have told so many people this, that to sit in the uncomfortableness. Because when you are uncomfortable, that's usually when you're doing something right. We get so comfortable in this state of numbness and the state of being high, in the lying and hiding. We get comfortable in that because we were forced to do that by our own addiction for however long. So when we're out of that, when we're having to sit in our feelings, we're uncomfortable in what we're feeling. We have to be uncomfortable telling the truth, no matter if it's a good truth or a bad truth. Be uncomfortable telling the truth. Be uncomfortable reaching out to new people or going new places or finding new friends or moving away from home because you really just can't be there anymore without, these urges. Do what makes you uncomfortable, because that's where the most growth is.
That's amazing. That's such a powerful statement again too, as well, and very mature. Truth is that that's exactly where people have to. That's where growth is, by the way. And many programs over the years, we used to use the gym metaphor, and if I was going to the gym to get myself better, and I'm pushing weight up on a bar, and I'm trying to strengthen my arm, as I push that weight, I'm going to get to a point of almost failure. And what happens in that moment is that your fiber breaks. The muscle fiber breaks, but ironically, 2 days later, it grows back twice as strong. So the truth in what she's sharing is that you go to your tether to just find out where your capacity is, which gives you the strength to go a little bit further the next time. It's a continuum of growth to get to that uncomfortableness. And I love your wisdom with the, if you're not uncomfortable, something's wrong. You need to check yourself. And the truth is, and that, let's preface this, that doesn't mean somebody being in pain. And we're not discussing that at all. This is just about getting past your little bit of comfort, because growth is in that uncomfortable moment. That's truly, and that's personal growth too. That's not just in recovery. That's anyone who's just trying to better themselves in life. Wow, that is amazing. So one last thing, Olivia. So what are some of the challenges that you face today now in the recovery on your journey, doing all these things that you have in front of you and all these opportunities too? But what are some of your challenges you see today, and what do you do to overcome them?
Absolutely. Kind of reaching on that piece of uncomfortableness, stepping into that uncomfortableness, because it is easier said than done.
Yes.
But there are times when I will have a rough day or I will struggle, and I don't want to tell someone that I'm struggling. I know I need to, and eventually I will, but I don't want to worry anyone. I don't want to tell my mom, hey, I'm having a really rough day and I really want to use today, because I don't want her to dwell in that. So that is one of the biggest struggles, is to finally be open, to finally be so vulnerable that you let people inside of your brain into those thoughts. However, when you do, it is the most rewarding thing.
Wow.
Because to sit there and to dwell on it just eats at me, and eats and eats and eats until those thoughts turn into actions.
Yes.
And I know that. And so it is a struggle to want to let someone know, hey, I had a rough day, I had a bad day, and to actually put action into preventing it. But it is something that needs to be done.
Yes. Wow. Once again, that is amazing. And I'm really just so impressed by your insight, especially somebody who's just gone through for a couple of years dealing with a hard addiction, by the way. This is no joke. Fentanyl and the products that are out there right now. And we have an entire video series on opioids, but specifically fentanyl and what it really is today. It's a really insidious drug in many ways, and it's being invented on a daily basis. The terms NPS, or novel psychoactive substance, because it's basically being reinvented every day, and that's a tough addiction. So kudos to you with that as well. Olivia, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to do this for the second round for us as well. I had asked you before, I look forward to bringing you back on again. If you have some time, I would love to really discuss more about some of the communication challenges and what we are doing to help other families, and what are some guidance for them regarding dealing with communication and the challenges of having a loved one as well who's dealing with that addiction too. So once again, thank you so much for your participation. It was a wonderful joy to absolutely have you here too as well.
Thank you for having me.
No, it's absolutely. Thank you so very much. Once again, I'd like to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to stop by and review this content. A special thanks as well to Olivia for taking time out of her personal schedule to share her experience, strength, and hope with families and loved ones struggling with an addiction, so that they may learn and have the hope and help that they need, knowing that there is a solution going forward. If you found any value in this content at all, could you please consider subscribing to our channel, or at least liking us, so that we can pass this forward to other families as well. If you'd like to learn more about our Tiger Resilience program, please see the description below with a link so you can find out more information. You can also contact us from there. We'd also love to hear from you. If you could consider leaving some comments so that we can get some insight about how you dealt with your experiences, whether you're a family member or the person struggling with the addiction, so that we can incorporate those stories into our future content as well. Our next few videos coming up will focus on communication skills and the challenges with addiction. As emphasized and shared by Olivia and the challenges that she faced with communication with her family and how she overcame those challenges, we will be discussing that in much greater detail with a lot of solutions and skill sets that you can incorporate into your life, whether you're dealing with an addiction or just dealing with life itself as a whole. Once again, a very heartfelt thank you for stopping by. My name is Bernie from Tiger Resilience, where we offer addiction solutions for family members and friends who struggle with a loved one dealing with an addiction, in addition to the person with the addiction. I look forward to speaking with you soon and wish you nothing but the best today.